Hi, my name is Raquel Gates, and I am an associate professor of cinema and media studies at the College of Staten Island. And I am thrilled to be here today talking with filmmaker Garrett Bradley and the amazing Rich family about Garrett's film Time. So I'm just going to kick it off because I'm so excited to chat about this film. So Garrett, this film is amazing and it covers such a wide span of time. Can you talk a little bit about how the film came together and the inspiration for the film?
Yes. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. It's such an honor, and I really appreciate the whole family, including Miss Peggy, joining us this evening. It's very special. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think that I'd like to start with without speaking too much, just to share a little bit about a short film called Alone that was made with the New York Times Op Docs. It was a 13-minute film. And I also like to mention that anybody who's interested in making a short op doc can go online and submit to them directly if they're interested in doing that, which is what I did. I didn't have any connections or know anybody at the New York Times. And my reason for making Alone was to a certain extent very similar and cannot be disconnected from the genesis for making Time, which was to think about ways in which we can address the issue of incarceration from a familial perspective, from showing the way in which, showing the effects of incarceration on women and on loved ones and family members. With Alone, it was a slightly different situation in which Lon was in the process of figuring out how she could move through the world without knowing what was going to happen to her partner, which was Desmond was awaiting trial for about a year and a half in a private prison, which is unconstitutional and is affecting thousands of people in the country right now. And my thought was to try to facilitate conversations, intergenerational conversations with Lon, where there could be a resource for her because of the stigmatization of being a quote unquote incarcerated family. She did not feel she had many resources that she could go to. And so I had contacted an organization called FLIC, Friends and Family of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children, which was co-founded and is now the director. Gina Wogmack co-founded the organization and is the director of that organization. And she picked up the phone and said, the first person you have to speak with is Fox Rich. And I remember being at the grocery store and it was really chaotic, but there was a real sense of passion and momentum for what could happen by bringing the two of them together. And so Fox is actually in Alone briefly and she makes a really vivid and critical connection between incarceration and slavery and the history of our country. And so when Alone came out, it became, for me, I think, really important to be able to continue that conversation from this perspective and to extend that dialogue and to not say that one film can stand alone or represent an entire experience. And Fox's experience, I think at that point, Fox, you had been 19 years in the process, right, of Robert being incarcerated?
About 18. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And so it was really important to try to expand that conversation and to show the many ways in which families and individuals are moving through the system in their own unique way. There's so much more to say, but I don't want to take over that part of it. I tend to talk.
So I want to build on what you just said a bit, that you wanted to show families and the impact on the families, right? And it seems to me that one of the ways that the film kind of pivots is in by showing all of these really intimate moments. I mean, we more than we see the absence of Robert, we feel it because we have this sort of intimate look at so many of the family's private moments, so many of which are captured in the footage that Fox took. And so I want to ask this question first of Garrett and then also to Fox. So can you talk a little bit about like the discovery of this extensive archive of family footage? And then Fox, if I would like you to speak a little bit to the motivation for recording all of this and keeping it.
Yeah, well, I think, so I had a really clear idea of what the film could be from an aesthetic standpoint and from a tonal standpoint in terms of how we were shooting it. And I think it was like when we thought we were done filming, which we clearly weren't. I'll never forget, Fox, I think you were actually on the phone with Robert at the moment, for being evening time, and you handed me this bag of years and years of your personal family archive, a lot of which, and correct me if I'm wrong, you hadn't seen since you shot, like it hadn't, because it was on kind of old school software at that point. And I think that was a major turning point for a lot of, I think it was a major turning point for the film, but I think also for me as a filmmaker, what it means to have somebody hand you their family archive, to trust with it, to not knowing everything that's on there, just the physicality of getting into a car, anything could have happened. I remember being incredibly nervous just driving in the car with all of this incredible material. And I think then when it came down to editing, I think it's really important just to take a step back and saying that as a filmmaker, there's this idea in the film industry of the auteur, of the director having sort of a singular vision, and that it's all about this one person who's making this film. And I really like to think about what we've made together as something that we have made together, that Fox and Rob and the entire family are not subjects in a film. They are in many ways equal partners and participants in the making of this film. And that there was I felt a spiritual connection between what Fox was doing with her camera, what Remington was doing with the camera, Lawrence, what a lot of the young boys were employed to do with the camera, that there was a synergy that started to exist with what I was shooting 18 years later, without knowledge of it, that then starts to come into fruition and create almost this third film between all of us.
That was so well said, Gary. You're gonna make me pull out the tissue again. Gary Bradley is amazing. Okay. And I think that, this work, Time, is just a true testament to the artist that is embodied in this human being. When I had the opportunity to meet Garrett through her calling about another project, I thought to myself, oh my God, somebody is willing to tell our story. Oh, this is such a wonderful opportunity. And even though it wasn't my story, I was equally as excited because it was one of our stories. Our meaning the 2.3 million Americans that are behind bars, and the vast majority of which are people of color, and the vast majority of which whose responsibility falls back on some woman of color in our community. So I can't say thank you enough for what Alone did, because it gave us a chance to talk about time. And so when Rob and I were intentionally recording our family story, initially it was just about me resisting what had happened to our family and saying that, yes, we did wrong, but we were willing to take responsibility for it. But how much you wanted us to pay was a price that was far too great for our actions, we felt. And so out of that resistance of saying you're not going to take him away from our family, I wanted to make sure he was in every moment. So we recorded so that one day when he came home, because we always knew in our souls, every last one of us, that he was coming home, regardless of his life sentence, he was going to be returned to us. And so to be able to record those moments was to defy what society had said, and that was he would not be a part of his children's life. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that I have from what we did many years ago is just encouraging other families, in particular our Black families, that we are making history. We are history. And if we don't find value in our own stories, who will? Each of us has a path that we have to walk, and it is important for us to document that path and praise it, because we're all grateful for our journey and our opportunity that we have in this big old thing called life.
Mm-hmm. Now,
somebody say better speak Fox Ridge.
Speak Fox Ridge.
So Fox, when you were recording all of this, obviously with the intention of it being for Robert's eyes, did you ever think that it would have a wider audience. Did you ever sort of think about showing the footage to anybody, even just to like, you know, I don't know, friends or other family members?
I think that one of the greatest compliments I get from Gary Bradley is that she calls me a manifester. And so in the vein of that, my spirit manifested Gary Bradley. I after about 10 years in, the footage that we filmed, it went from just being about documenting archival footage for my husband. Then it became about, oh my God, I cannot believe that this is happening to us. I cannot believe that for our actions of taking $5,000, that it has been 10 years in prison. He has missed our children growing up, and you know, just really struggling with our treatment in the justice system. So from that point, I wanted more so to, I realized I wasn't by myself, that this was happening to millions of other people. And so then it became a point of me documenting so that we can make sure that we tell this story, that I don't think that our society is this heinous. I believe that our society is just this uninformed, that if we knew in our society that other human beings were being treated like this, that their lives through the usage of time is being snuffed from our families, I just tend to believe that they would do something different. And that's what we believe that time will do, that this will birth a new thought and a new understanding about the true meaning of time in our lives. If I answered your question.
Oh, absolutely. And more, and then some. You know, for me, when I was watching the film, I think what stood out to me as being so sort of magical is that, and I really appreciate, Garrett, your sort of description of this as like a collaboration, because there are the sort of the structural critiques, right? The interrogation of what it means to condemn a man to life, right? And the question of like, what does it mean to be in this place called Angola Plantation, like all of that, right? But it's also not just that. It's also about these, you know, sort of seemingly small moments of, you know, getting your kids ready for school and, you know, helping them prepare for their French exam and, you know, doing the birthday party in one kindergarten classroom and then going to the other. I mean, all of those moments that are so deeply human. And as I was watching, you know, it occurred to me, you know, by the time we get to the end of the film, I realized I actually hadn't seen a lot or anything of your relationship with Robert, but I felt the connection and the love between the two of you from the very beginning. And it's so omnipresent throughout the film. And so I wanted to pivot a little bit and ask you all about your relationship, and to give a little bit of backstory to that. How did the two of you all meet?
There are two different versions of this story.
Aren't there always? Yes. Mm-hmm.
It just depends on which one of us you ask. Now, if you
Sure.
ask Fox, then you'll get one version, and then if you ask me, then you'll get the other version.
The truth is what you get from me.
And then that depends on who you're asking, right? But Fox and I met in 1987. I was home on leave from the military, and a church member of mine was in need of a ride, and she and Fox just happened to be together at that time. And I told him, sure, I would give him a ride. So when I came by the house to come pick him up, I knocked on the door, and I swear to God, an angel answered the door. I've have to say that I believe in love at first sight, mainly because it happened to me, but it's happened to me more than once. When I laid eyes on my mom, I fell in love with her. And much of the same experience happened when I knocked on the door that day and Fox answered the door. She didn't know it at the time, but in my mind, she was going to be mine, right? So long story short, we ended up, I reached out to her later on that night because a friend of mine who I had thought I had hooked Fox up with ended up calling Fox from my house. And then after calling her, she wasn't available. We left and came back. And when we came back, I remember hitting redial on the phone. And when I hit redial on the phone, of course, keep in mind, this is like in 1987. So when I hit redial on the phone, it went back to Fox's line, and then she picks up. When she picks up, I, went back to relive the day with her, and, to let her know who I was. And she was like, oh yeah, I know who you are. Matter of fact, I thought you and my girl had something going on. I'm like, wait a minute. your girl, no, hold up, get her on three-way. So she ended up calling my church member, which was her girlfriend, on three-way, so that we could squash all of what she had obviously told Fox was going on between us. And from that moment forward, from that day forward, I mean, we have been constantly like you were when kids growing up. I mean, we get on the phone with each other at night and we fall asleep on the phone with each other. We try to put each other off the phone so that we can go. We end up still being on the phone with one another. And it's been that way all the way through our 21-year period of incarceration. Whenever I was away overseas. Right. So now you're talking about what, 33 years worth of union to one another, but 23 years now in matrimony to one another. And it's been one exciting ride after another.
Some not so exciting.
Right. So that's my version of the story. Now, somewhere in between there, Fox says she never had no intentions on hooking up with me. She wasn't all the way feeling me, but y'all saw the tape, right? Oh, I just love me some Robert.
Yeah, you really did not have to start the movie off with that either, with me groaning and whining, bemoaning my love. That was
I
wrong.
love it, Garrett.
I mean, I have to say that line, that's it. That's what pulled me in. I mean, there was so many scenes and so many moments that I felt connected to, but that scene where you're like, crooning your love for this man, I was all in at that point. And because it's just such a pure moment, and I think it just gestures towards the intense and this amazing connection that you all have. And not just a connection, I mean, lots of people can have a connection when they meet, but really the fortitude and the strength of that love to sort of see you through this incredible and incredibly difficult experience. I want to sort of turn to that a little bit, because you'd only been married for a very short time before you start your business and the investor pulls out, and then and you decide to sort of take matters into your own hands. Can you talk a little bit about sort of that period and that decision and sort of the aftermath of that?
I think that I would probably sum it up in what Rob said to me was, as I'm questioning, after 10 years of dating, when you finally marry the love of your life, and then 6 months later, you're facing a practical life sentence. What in the world are we doing here? And Rob said it best to me when I asked him. He said, in our vows, we said for better or for worse, did you think the better would come first? And I responded, yeah, at least about 10 years on the good side. And it didn't happen that way. So it was just, it's just that love is the most divine chemical in the universe, Raquel, and it dissolves everything that is not of itself. Love is God, God is love. And when you stand on love, then, nothing else, hate cannot prevail against love. And so this institution that has been created to separate, to torture, to dehumanize our families, when you stand on love, it just overrides it, it overpowers it. And I think that's what, we are hopeful that other families that are similarly fixed like ours will be able to take away from this film, is that where love is, love conquers all. Love never fails.
No, I mean, absolutely. It's one of the things that strikes me is how just incredibly tragic and unfair the sentence sort of seems, right? So, I mean, just the basic details. The two of you, you rob a bank for a fairly small amount, $5,000 is it, I believe.
Correct.
And then Robert, you received this incredibly hefty prison sentence. I mean, both of you received sentences, but Robert, yours is the really heavy one. Can you speak a little bit about how you felt when you heard the judge's ruling?
Well, I know we spent almost 2 years in pretrial, and that was leading up to the trial itself. And, during that period of time, it was kind of a roller coaster ride as far as there was a plea bargain that was offered from the onset of the deal, to which I had pled guilty to. The plea bargain got fumbled somewhere along the way based upon a mix-up in communications between the attorneys that were, one attorney that was exiting the case and another attorney that was coming into the case. At which point the second attorney felt that he could have gotten a better deal. He fumbled that plea bargain. And as a result of it, I ultimately ended up standing trial for the charges themselves after he had fumbled the plea bargain. It wasn't until, well, I guess after he fumbled the plea bargain, I ended up standing trial. And then after standing trial, of course, I ended up getting a 60-year sentence as a first offender to armed robbery. It was probably flooring to say the least. I think even when Fox and I were going back and forth, even after the trial was over, and pondering what type of sentence the judge may hand out. And I'm thinking that at least if they were offering a 10-year plea bargain at the onset of things, that at worst they may go twice that much, maybe 3 times that much. So you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 years, right? And when I'm looking at all of the other guys that are coming through, have some other charges, and in some cases far more aggravated circumstances than my own. And I'm watching them get boot camp in exchange for sentencing. When I'm seeing them get probation and parole in situations where those weren't necessarily available to them. So it's just those kind of things that I looked at, and never thought in a million years that a 60-year sentence is what would get handed down. And it took the wind out of us, to say the least.
I mean, what really strikes me about your story, the first thing that strikes me is just the perseverance from each of you, individually and then collectively as a family, but then also the ways that this story is so completely timely and relevant right now, and the discussions around the prison industrial system. I'm thinking about this right now as I'm reading about prison labor being used to fight these wildfires that are ravaging the West Coast, and the very clear connections, I think, to like the legacies of slavery and the exploitation of Black labor. And so I wanted to ask you, Garrett, when you were making this film, was that context sort of in the background, or did you start to tell a personal story and it became something else?
No, I think that American history can't be separated from any story, and American history is the history of enslavement. I think it would be very difficult for me to, because really fundamentally this is a film about love, as Fox so beautifully said. It's a love story, and it's about resistance, and about resistance through the unification of family. And all these other things can't be separated from that, but it doesn't necessarily start that way, if that makes sense. So I think in everything that I do, I think fundamentally I'm interested in justice. I think justice is what drives every project I've ever made. But I'm interested in how we understand justice from a more nuanced perspective. That it can't be that vague. It has to. We see it in the daily activities and speeches and experiences of the individual, and then these broader themes and histories that are actually present. They're not even history. Time all collapses into itself, into the present moment, always. And so I think even in the context of talking about the relevance of the film, it's always been relevant. And I think until we abolish prisons and think about the way in which our funding is being distributed, and we address racism on a major structural level, it will always be relevant.
It strikes me that it's a not to keep riffing on this idea of time, but it's such a timeless film because of the issues that are being brought up. It's about you know, the rich family, but it could just as easily be the story of, you know, how many Black of any family, you know, and the privilege of being able to follow your family's story, but then sort of that really gut punch realization of how many families are suffering because of this incredibly unjust system that is not just about penalizing, you know, individuals, but really condemning entire families to prison. I find it really interesting that this film is resonating the way that it is right now, which I think is fantastic. And Garrett, you won Best Director Prize at Sundance, which is tremendous. Why do you think that this film seems to be connecting with critics and audiences so strongly right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, because it's a good question because I think to most of us who are conscious, we would understand why this story is important no matter what. I think that that question also feeds into understanding the ways in which our cultural consciousness are validated by the way in which mainstream media, when they want to recognize things that are already there. And I think that COVID, and I think that the uprising that we've witnessed in this year, even though, you know, that this after January, I do think that we're just kind of in this 2020 vision, like we're all in this space of unpeeling the layers and trying to address reality to a certain extent. I think that the time that people have been given, forced to have in some cases to not work, to be with themselves in places of solitude, may have some effect on the way in which we're willing to be compassionate, willing to see outside of ourselves to a certain extent. I don't really know why. I couldn't really answer that question in a super accurate way, but I do think that that the solitude has something to do with and the way in which capitalism has sort of reached its peak in our country is forcing people to reflect in a real way.
I mean, it's even interesting. I know the film will be streaming and also released in theaters as well, but it struck me when I was watching it that in some ways I was very grateful to be in this space, this very quiet space without a lot of distractions, like with my family close by that I could like put my arm around on the sofa as we watch the film, because there's something about it that's so, I mean, I keep saying intimate, but it's just such a deeply intimate film and such a loving film. And I think that really comes across most strikingly in the scenes with your boys, which are just so loving and so touching. And I wanted to ask Fox and Rob, and then I'm going to sort of pivot a little bit and then ask your sons about sort of their experience watching themselves on screen. You know, it's hard enough trying to raise kids, let alone Black kids, let alone Black boys in this society in this moment. And I mean, just your dedication to raising them well, and sort of the result of how, you know, incredibly poised they are in this film. I mean, it really just sort of shines through when you're watching it. What can you talk a little bit about your motivation and also like your support system in ensuring that they grew up to be like the amazing young men that we're, you know, seeing right now?
My mama. We thank God for my mama, you know, because she taught me well. And so since she taught me well, I could, you know, pass that on to our children, and the support that she rendered to my husband and I. So I think it would probably, that answer for both of us, Raquel, would be his mother and my mother. You know, my husband speaks often, and I'll let him share. He speaks often about his mother's love. My mother, for me, just always yielded determination and strength. And one thing that she taught me that I was able to teach our children that is a difference maker no matter where you are is my mother taught me how to speak. She was over the youth department at our church when I was a child. So every Easter speech, every Christmas speech, every holiday speech we had to do and do it well or we were going to be in trouble. But, you know, when you can speak, then you can speak up for yourself. And as I share in the film, my prayer when I went to prison was that God would allow me to use my voice, that my mother had taught me how to speak and how to use my voice now to speak for those who are voiceless, for the 2.3 million of our sisters and brothers that are behind bars, and to be able to give weight to that. You and someone like, because then you'll be like, you know.
I think you did well.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that point because I very much want to talk about your speaking and also the role that faith played in your experience. But I also just want to pause for a second because I'm just dying to know how your sons felt watching this film. And I mean, I feel so fortunate that we have Malik, Lawrence, Remington, and Rob Jr. All here right now. What is this like watching like your childhood and your experience growing up on film? Had you seen any of this footage before? What is it like watching it? And when is the first time that you got to see this footage?
I would say that a lot of the footage, and it was interesting to watch the film because I got to see myself not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. And so growing up and being able to see myself grow up on television, and it allowed me to have a sort of an out of body experience because I was able to literally watch my life in front of my eyes and see how far I've actually come. And through this system and growing up, it's always been so much of pushing every day to the next day. Just get to the next day, just get to the next day, because you know he's coming home, but you know it's not going to be yesterday, but it'll be another day and it'll be another day. And so being able to push through that, you suppress a lot of the emotions and a lot of the different memories that you have going through that extensive amount of time. And especially as young Black men, you're taught to be strong and you're taught to shoulder everything on your shoulders. And so you get through a lot of that and you get through life that kind of way. And so to actually have that film and allow us to be vulnerable and see the vulnerability in the film and throughout our own lives, it definitely brought about for me a lot of emotion because I was able to tap back into some of the emotion that I had not experienced going through it, or that like I said, I had suppressed. So even seeing little things like the covers that my mom in the room is on, or that Justice is putting the sock on, I can see those visually, see those sheets again. And so it brings back all of those emotions that, because a lot of the footage I had not seen before seeing the film. So it really, it was groundbreaking and heartbreaking, and definitely a heart blessing to be able to see, and for Garrett to put it together the way that she did. It was in synchrony is the word I use for it for the time. It was definitely harmonious for sure.
Touche. Well said, Mr. Remington.
Well felt. It was felt.
Don't just jump out there.
I'm waiting for Malik and Lawrence and Rob Jr.
Well, actually, for me personally, it's very surreal to see on screen. Because we remember living all of those moments, where not every single one of them, but to see them up on screen. I'd say the piece of the film that stood out most to me was when my dad gets out of jail, because even having seen him in person when he got out, in the midst of all of this going on for 21 years, your life never stops. So even getting the call, it's like, great, but then you still got stuff to do. So to see it on film, it's like you got to feel it all over again, or feel it almost from the outside watching. It's like, wow, he really came home, you know? So yeah, I think that about sums it up for me.
Okay.
One of the things I really like about the film was just the transitions in times in which we would go to us being young boys and to a point where we were actually young men now, and just the being able to give a visual scale to myself and being able to even relive some of those feelings that I felt in the past. It doesn't matter. and how it transitions into our lives and how we chose to craft ourselves and such to get stronger than the integrity in which, the weight that had fallen upon our family. And it's a lot, man. It really is a lot. It really is a lot. And it's just a beautiful expression that the fact that we've came this far. And man, we're here. If we ain't done nothing else.
Are we there yet?
Were there any moments that were maybe surprising to you? I mean, like things, I mean, it always occurs to me how little I know about my parents that I sort of discover the older, that I get. But I don't have the benefit of having so much of this caught on film. So are there any revelations or sort of surprises for you, things maybe you didn't know about your parents and kind of what they were dealing with, or some context you weren't aware of?
Honestly, for the most part, our parents have always been really upfront with us. One thing that our parents have never tried to do is hide things from us. And it's one of the things that has ultimately brought us closer as family, as brothers. As we walk through this life to try to deal with the mistakes that we have made as a family and to live past those things that where we can live a better life. So honestly, no, it's not much that we don't know, because we know that.
Transparency, that's always a great thing in families, right? So Miss Peggy, I am so just delighted to hear you talk about the film. And it really struck me as I was watching that this is Fox's story. But I kept thinking so much about the labor of women in Black families. And, I think about sort of even keeping the archive, right? I mean, every family I know, including my own, it's the women who keep the photo albums, who make sure that everything's recorded, who make sure that every obituary from every funeral is saved somewhere. My friends, and what really kind of stood out to me is that you are the support system, that Fox is the strong woman holding up her family, but you're also there supporting her and holding her up. So can you speak a bit about sort of your experience during this time period that the film captures?
It brought back memories, old memories. Seeing the twins as they are now, all grown up, and be able to look in the film and I see them doing things that I remember them doing in the film. It's amazing. It's wonderful to know that they were here then and they're up here now. And it's just time. Waits on no one. You got to keep moving because the clock is steady ticking. So you take this time and make something of yourself, or time will pass you by. You can't wait until tomorrow. And that's what I've always told them. You need to go to school, be the best that you can be. Don't sass the teachers, because they got theirs. You got to get yours. Yes, right.
Because that's a teacher of 36 years, Mom? How long were you a teacher?
About 37. Anyway, I got up every Saturday morning, every other Saturday morning, because we had to go see Sybil. I didn't go see Sybil. I carried the boys, the 4 boys, to see Sybil. They better than I am, because I cannot stand those doors clacking behind me and I'm inside. I couldn't take that. But whatever I could do to support her with her children, I tried to do that. We went to church every Sunday, just about every Sunday. If the door to the church was open, we were there. If there was a program,
we was on
we
it.
were on it. And I showed the boys see how important that was. See how important that was then, and it's important now, because they got it. They ain't gonna get up there with their head down. They're not gonna even talk to you with their heads down. They're gonna hold their heads up, because that's how you speak and talk to people. Good attributes, and the mama had some and passed it on, and I just sit back and relax now, because I know those boys are going to be somebody. If I don't care what kind of work they do, they're going to do it and do it well. And they're going to do some kind of work, because they were not, I said, oh, Sybil, pushing them too hard. And I'd be so angry. I'd be in my room and I would be so angry. Who does she think want to sell cars? But it fed them. She was able to keep them all there together. And she made enough at it so that they could live a good life, such as it was. And when she said she was moving to New Orleans, I couldn't take it. But she kept them in a good neighborhood. And they basically have been in a high rise ever since they've been in New Orleans. I told her I don't come to New Orleans anymore, because they turned my high rise into some condos or whatever they got going with them now. And I could just go down there and stay for weeks at a time, sitting on the patio, looking over the city.
So we don't have a patio, so she doesn't visit now, Raquel. But I did want to take a minute, if I may, and offer an excuse or regrets for our twin boys, Freedom and Justice. They definitely wanted to be here with us today, because they would not have missed an opportunity to share with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. But both of them are both of them are in service. Justice is in service in Korea, and Freedom is in service with FLIC, Friends and Families of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children, as they did a freedom ride to the youth prisons across the state of Louisiana today.
Oh, wow.
So they're not here, but they're working.
They're working and doing pretty amazing work too, from what it sounds like.
And I would like to say to you, my love, I have thought about all those things that you have written about, but unless I wrote them down, my thoughts, nobody else would never know. But you did. You took the time to write your thoughts down, and it's wonderful. I enjoyed reading them. I got some more I'm going to read.
Okay. Well, we'll have to have a conversation about this, because
this is a couple of books.
This is news to me. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. You heard that.
Yeah.
Well,
no, it's
my thing is, when coming up, we did not have our choices were limited. So they said, go to school, be a teacher. So that's what we did. 4 of my sisters are teachers, because that was the norm. If you could go to college, then you went to college to be a teacher. Very seldom. They'd have thought you was a fool if you come around there and tell me, I'm going to be a writer. It wasn't going to happen, not here. You better go to school, do something so you can make you some money. But you inspired me. Not that I'm going to do anything about it at 75, but you certainly, you've been a blessing to have, to read, and to meet you today. I got some more reading I got to do read some more of your thoughts.
Well, I thank you. I mean, it's, it's funny you said that, and it reminded me of my own grandmother who, when I come from a family of educators, and I remember when I got my PhD, and I was like, Grandma, I got my PhD, and she's like, oh, yeah, that's what we do. Like that was her attitude, that's how grandmothers are, like that's what we shoot for. So I feel like this pillar of education is such a strong one, especially, in Black families. And then the other one is faith, which is plays such a big part in the film. And so I was, and it plays such a big part in obvious ways. I mean, there's all the great, footage, Fox, of you speaking at like the churches, right? But then there's also the soundtrack, which I'm hoping Garrett could speak to a little bit as well. If you could talk about the composer of the soundtrack, which is so stunning in the film.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one of those kind of, it felt like a spiritual universal thing that just happened, because Emma Hoy, which is how she prefers to be named, she's a 96-year-old Ethiopian nun who was a prisoner of war and was classically trained in Western music, and then went back to her country in Ethiopia and kind of reinvented a completely unique genre of music. And the score is actually from an album that was made in 1962, I believe, which is the only time she's ever agreed to have her music recorded. And it was for the purpose of raising money for an orphanage that she's supporting. Mm-hmm. And so I really loved the idea of thinking about her and Fox and the family, and being able to bring them together, that the film is this way of bringing efforts and history and spirituality and love and pleasure and joy that exists in that music into one space, into one space. Yeah, and she loved the film and loved the family, and it was, I haven't been able to speak to her directly, but her foundation reached out to us, and I never shared this, and luckily it was hidden from me until after the fact, but apparently we didn't know if we were going to get permission to use the music, and the foundation hadn't watched the film until very close to when we really needed to know. And then when they watched the film, they just fell in love with everything that it stood for. And so that was also, I think, a really nice blessing to know that it wasn't music to a film. It meant something much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess that's why it felt much bigger than that. That's my first time hearing all of those details, Garrett, but just beautiful. I'm so glad that Spirit drew that to you, because it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Peggy, you mentioned the family was in church when whenever the doors were open, and I was just hoping that the rest of the family could speak a little bit too to that idea of faith, and really faith as another form of support.
It's just one of my sisters that may be able to say something, and
we have the charger.
I lost 3 of my sisters. I lost 4 of my sisters this year.
Go get the iPad charger.
And it was not due to COVID either. They all had some health issues, but it's just 3 of us left. And one sister, I should have invited her, but I didn't know. Veda called me just as I sat down to trying to get on. But anyway, I'm going to invite her to the next forum.
You so kind, Mama. It's not open to the public.
Oh, well, she asked me about my sisters, other family members.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We were getting a charge, and we know that we have editing capacity. So thank you.
Good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give us just a second.
Sure.
What you got?
Yeah, I was when I was watching the film, I was really struck by like the church scenes because I just, I thought it did such a lovely job of showing kind of how layered the family's life was, right? It's not just a singular story of like this family and the dad's in prison. I can't remember which of you said, and life goes on, right? And so it's the Rob being in prison is like, it's hovering over everything, but also life continues. And so for me, the church scenes and also when you're speaking were such powerful moments. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit to that.
I think that for us, you talking
me.
You.
I was hoping Fox would say something, but also Miss Peggy. Yeah.
Yeah, your turn.
Thank you. Raquel, I think that faith for us, you can't even begin to go through a situation like this, through such dire straits of hopelessness, without having some level of faith. I don't know how anyone could do it without knowing a higher power, because the resistance in this institution is so deeply rooted in hate that you have to tap into the strength of the higher power or the highest energy in order to overcome it. And so for us, we hear people having grown up in the church, and we have heard people talk about faith our whole lives, but every day for us had to be a walk of faith, because at the end of the year, you would realize that you thought he was coming home this year. It's been 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years now. You thought that this was definitely going to be the year. And when the next year comes, you have to literally pick yourself back up again and your children and get them to believe with you all over again that this is going to be the year. That's not possible without God. That's not possible without being in tune with a higher power and knowing that higher power has given you, the word that you're going to be all right and you're going to be provided for. So without that, we wouldn't have been able to make it.
I know that definitely holds true for me. Being on the other side of the wall, there's no way possible that you can make it through a 21-year sentence, incarcerated in America's most bloodiest prison, and not have faith. I mean, it has to be the same kind of faith that Daniel, when he was in a lion's den, it had to be the same kind of faith that when Paul was stuck in a dungeon and his family didn't know where he was, and it took faith in order to get all of those type of men. It took faith to get Mandela through his time in prison. It's no other way around it. I think when I grew up, they had a saying that if you had faith, just the size of a mustard seed, you can say mountains be thou removed. And prison, 60-year sentence is definitely a mountain that would need to be removed. But Black people as a whole, I think we are a resilient people and we're a faithful people. And I think it was the same faith that got our people through slavery of yesterday. I think it's that same kind of faith that gets our men and women today through slavery under another name, mass incarceration. And Garrett, again, I can't thank you enough for what you were able to do when, just parts of the film as to how it is that the drone comes in through the entryway of Angola, and it takes the audience, into a private, secret place where, so much wrongdoing is happening and going on. And it's like that all across the country. And, but again, it takes faith to be able to come up out of darkness like that. And again, for Garrett to come back up out of Angola, and then, now you're seeing as we were also able to come up out of that darkness as a result of our resilience and faith, to demonstrate to the world such a radical love. You know, and it's not just the love of Fox and I, but it's the love of, you know, that our people, Black people, you know, have had since the inception of their kind.
Mm-hmm. I love that phrase that you just used, a radical love, because you know, it feels like that's what the power of the film is, that, you know, so many things deteriorate over time, you know, film footage deteriorates, memory deteriorates, but love is a thing that never expires.
Caucus all.
Yes. I have time for one last question. Sadly, I wish I could just hang out with you all and talk to you all for like another like 2 hours.
We have to
but,
come to New Orleans for that after COVID. Then we'll, you know.
Oh, I will. Don't invite me. I will be there. Like, you know, with whole family in tow. So one last question, which I want to ask to everybody who feels, you know, sort of compelled to say something. What do you think is the lesson to be taken from your story? What can other families, especially families who are dealing with loved ones in prison, what can they learn from this film?
We fall down, but we get up. We have to keep on pushing. You know how you do that? One foot in front of the other one. Every day is a new day, a chance to make this world a better place. And that's what we're trying to do. We have to show those that are incarcerated now that they can make it. And the families to be strong, and if this film, if they watch it, it's going to show the world how to help, how families can stay together. They don't have to be in the same place all the time, but they can still stay together and help one another up, help each other up. Whosoever will, let him come.
Y'all didn't even know my mama was gonna show out like that today, huh? Rob, come on, man. I know you got something for us.
As Fox Rich always says, family is everything and everything is family, for sure. That's something that would definitely be a takeaway overall, just because all things can be done through family, you know?
That's right.
And I would say for me, the biggest takeaway is probably one of my favorite one-liners from the movie. And that is that success is the best revenge. And success is the best revenge in multiple different facets. And being that systemically, this system was meant to break a family apart. But successfully, we have stood together to even 21 years later, and we stand together whole and loved as a family. And so we continue to have success on that front. And so when I look at myself, and they say that kids of incarcerated families are 7 times more likely to go to prison themselves than to graduate high school. And here we sit, and all of us have graduated high school and moving towards college. And I've gotten to the point to where I am now, this is my last semester of dental school. So I'm very excited. So, and it shocked me that when I stood there and I was getting my white coat, in a part of that speech in my white coat ceremony, the professor also says that we are 1.8% of the entire population as Black men that got accepted into a medical or a dental school. And so that kind of number resonates with me when you say that you come from such a establishment and such a deep down place that systemically was meant to break us, and that not only is it not going to break us, but that we continue to break through the levels and the different barriers, because that we know that the success is the best revenge above all things.
All right.
I'd have to say the one for me is one of Mama's quotes, and that is that you can make it if you try. And I think.
Cut out.
Did everybody cut out? What happened? There we go.
Yeah, you're back now.
That you can make it if you try.
You might need to do it again.
And that is one of the sayings that not only resonate with me through the film, but it was a saying that she gave many, many years ago that stayed with me during my time of prison, and it made me realize that I can make it if I try. And I am hopeful that that will pass on to all people that get an opportunity to see the film, that no matter what their situations may be, that they will come to the realization that they can make it if they try.
Malik, Law, don't fight to get in there. Let us hear you though.
One thing my dad told me when I was young that always stuck with me was that time is your most valuable commodity. And I'd say, as I watched the film, I remember a lot of times just with friends, you express the experience in different things. And we were always limited to those 15-minute phone calls. And it always taught me to value and appreciate time differently. So I'd say if anybody were to take anything from this film is to value the time that you have for yourself as well as the time that you have with other people.
Yeah.
I think the one of the beautiful things that it demonstrates is that although a lot of people go through the dark circumstances in which our family has been unfortunate to go through decisions not held by our own, but by ones we love. And that even through those trying times that we still have, you can still have the determination that you need in this world so that you can find so that you can find the light in the dark. And I think that a lot of people need to realize that there's somebody out there, there's somebody that's less than you, there's somebody that is living the life that you have lived, and that there can be greater things that will last in front of you.
Right. And then Garrett, do you want the last word on a lesson to take out of time?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think what was just said is so beautiful. And I kind of, again, in the spirit of collaboration, feel that it's best heard from the people who directly experience these things that the film is exploring. And I'm just incredibly grateful to have been able to work with the whole family. And I hope that that there can be an actual emotional connection with the numbers, with all the statistics, and that there can be no way in which it can be dismissed. That we can provide as many entry points for people to understand this problem in our country and to see us as individuals, to see our families as a blending and accompaniment of individual people that are loving and that are fighting. So that's the most I can ask for. And then I guess we'll see what happens. But I think no matter what, like awards or any of that, I mean, I think that just getting people to see the film and to connect with it is the ultimate goal, and it's going to have a real effect. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank all of you all, one, for being so open and so inviting, both in terms of the film, but also in this space here in talking about it. So thank you again. And thank you for allowing me to sort of serve as an interlocutor. It was such an honor, and I'm so excited that this film is out in the world, and I hope that everybody sees it as soon as they can, because it's lovely and beautiful and just absolutely transcendent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you, Gary.
Good to see all of you. Yes, indeed.
Go answer your phone.